and welcome to Pigeon Duiwe News Cape Town tour. As the Pigeon Duiwe News team, we came down here in the motherland in Cape Town. We're going to have a few interviews with the top fanciers of Cape Town. They'll share with us how pigeon racing in Cape Town is and why they're racing here in Cape Town. And the first fancier we'll be visiting is Karl Schwormstedt. Stay tuned.
Hi everybody. I would like to spread a message to catch the South African pigeon news portal on pigeonduiwenews.com, and don't miss their web series where different fanciers get featured on the show every Fridays on YouTube. Pigeon Duiwe News TV. The news company is owned by Mr. Samuel, whom I met and who is a client of Pipa and who used to buy the Golden Prince and Gentle Lady and every other, many other super pigeons. And his main objective is to grow the sport, the pigeon sport in South Africa, as there is a big potential, and also to grow the sport worldwide. So don't forget to subscribe to this channel and to like or comment the channel. So I would like to say hello to all the pigeon fanciers in South Africa. Many regards from Belgium. I'm Nicholas. This was Nicholas from Pipa from Belgium. Bye bye.
Mr. Karl, thanks for inviting us to your home, and also thanks for being on today's show.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Carl.
Now, can you tell us where it all started? I mean, your racing career. What got you into pigeon racing, and how did it all come about?
I think it's one of those sports that you either are taken by it immediately, and I think a lot of fanciers that will tell a similar story. They went into a back garden and they saw these pigeons in a loft, or they found a stray pigeon in their back garden, or their parents had pigeons. And for me it was, I visited a friend, a school friend one day, and I just walked into the back garden and there was this pigeon loft, and I found myself drawn to it, and went in and looked inside and then asked could I be taken inside the loft, and the bug bit. Then the next question was, may I have a pair of pigeons? And at that given time, my parents were dead against me racing pigeons, so they kind of lured me into having fancy pigeons. So my dad gave me, and I wasn't allowed to keep birds at my own house. I had to go and keep these fancy pigeons at my grandmother's house. And she lived 5 blocks down the road. And then just over a period of time, my father just saw my commitment to these fancy birds, and he realized, okay, this is and I was helping many other pigeon fanciers that were racing. I was scraping their lofts, which is cleaning their lofts, and being full-time by their place on a given weekend to watch the birds' arrivals. And then they decided, no, this youngster definitely, he's keen. We better now start trying to assist him. And so that was my first year in racing, was Young Birds in 1978. I was 12 years old. I was in primary school. I was just heading off to high school at that given time.
And at that time, were there many, or were there plenty of fanciers racing in Cape Town?
Well, the interesting part, that areas have changed. The sport has evolved. The area that I lived in at that given time was Claremont, which is about 4 kilometers down the road here. And at that time, there was 16 pigeon fanciers, highly competitive pigeon fanciers in that area. Today, there's 1. Then I moved from Claremont into the Plumstead area, which had a strong contingent of competitive lofts. And not so long ago, there must have been about 14 highly competitive lofts in the area, and it's dwindled again. So it evolves. Certain areas it grows, and then as time progresses, it gets smaller. And pigeon racing is very much a, how can I put it? It is areas or position plays a part in racing, especially in certain distances. So people, if they want to become more professional and more competitive, they move into areas to become more competitive and more professional. and to enjoy their sport, because they want to be really part of the action, where it's all happening at a given time. So yeah, that's how the pigeons work.
Talking about areas now, the area you were racing from, or where you started, how did it evolve as time went?
What transpired, the given area from Clement, from Maitland to let's say Weinberg, for people to understand, that was an area, a distance of, let's say, 15 kilometers sideways. There was at a given time 70 to 80 members in that area in our given organization, and it dwindled and dwindled and dwindled. Eventually it came down to 30 members. And then the area I'm living in now, to SP, was another organization, to Fishhook, and they had at a given time 120 members, and they dwindled over a period of time to 50 members. And then there is the Athlone Bontehevel area there was an organization there that was about 30 members strong, but there were a few organizations in that area. So how the game's evolved, when I moved initially into this area, I was in an organization from here back to Fishhook. There were 120 participating members, and it dwindled down to 50. So what transpired was, we decided that we needed to, today with pigeon results, there is the Winbird system, for example. It's a press of a button to work out results. So you put people's coordinates in, you put people's names in, and into the profile of the program, and you get a quick result. So what we did was we formulated a result of 3 organizations to get back to 120 members. Because our belief here, and a lot of people's belief here, is an organization should be 100 plus to be a highly competitive organization. But it has changed. As you can hear, it got smaller, so we had to expand the boundaries to get that number. But then there's other areas you take, for example, in the northern suburbs, you have the Durbanville area, and that area now has progressed to a club of almost 20 strong. That's just a club, never mind an organization. So people move, and it's a new developed area. It's younger generation coming into the sport. It's got better back gardens, nice new houses. So that's how the sport moves along all the time, especially in Cape Town.
So speaking about Cape Town, what's the unique thing about racing here? Well, what makes Cape Town different? I know the numbers, I know the youth, but can you just elaborate further on the uniqueness side?
Well, Cape Town has one heck of a mountain range, and the birds have to cross that mountain range when they come back from any race point that is on our program. We predominantly race up the N1. The furthest generally is the Tennyson race, Bloemfontein Tennyson, which is 900 to 1,000 kilometers. Sometimes we deviate to different race points, but generally that is the furthest race point. And every time those birds are approaching Cape Town, they have to cross this mountain range. And what transpires here during the winter period is it can become rainy and overcast. And that becomes the final hurdle for the pigeons to get through that mountain range in those conditions of rain and overcast conditions. So any Cape Town fancier will sit down and say, what's the difference between yourselves and anywhere else? They'll immediately say the mountain range. It's a challenge. And I do believe it's a unique pigeon that handles that range as well. So anything new you're bringing in to your family of birds, the first test is, it's funny, you would purchase a bird. Let me say I purchase a bird from you in Johannesburg, and you'll ask me how they're training. And there's always a little funny statement, just wait till I get onto the other side of the mountain, I'll tell you then. We must get on that side first, and they must learn to come to this side. It's a tongue-in-cheek joke, but it's a true Cape Town challenge. The other unique thing is we have a lot of youth coming into the sport. I don't know, Cape Town seems to have, to my mind, the correct formula for pigeon racing. And I just want to give my thoughts on it, and people can challenge me on it. Generally, your gardens are quite small in Cape Town. They're not Johannesburg sizes. And if you go to even more other areas, they even have smaller backyard gardens to what I'm presently residing in. I believe our pigeon racing programs facilitate to smaller lofts. So we take into account that a person can be competitive with 60 racing pigeons in his back garden in Cape Town. He can be competitive with 12 breeding pairs stud pigeons. I think that is a challenge. I speak under correction, but in the Johannesburg area, I don't think anybody can. I start personally a season with 75 pigeons. Nobody in Joburg, I think, starts with 75 pigeons. They have to go to 100. Their program, their type of racing demands more birdage, where we don't demand that out of a pigeon fancier. So I think that's one of the positives in our sport that we must never lose focus on is the smaller teams, and I think we're doing the right thing in the area.
How's your training program? Because birds get lost and so forth. So how do you keep that number always in the loft?
Cape Town is a little more conservative in their approach to training pigeons. If you sit with the Joburg fancier, they'll immediately say, I train my birds around the loft and I immediately take them 100 kilometers for their first training flight. If we did that in Cape Town, we'll lose all our pigeons. My training program is I start off at 15 to 20 kilometers and I progress to till we get to the mountain, which is a 60 kilometer fly. And then we'll sit at Paarl, for example, and let the birds come in on a number of occasions to gain experience, and then we decide, okay, we're going to go over the mountain now. And that's the first hurdle. Everybody gets nervous, I can assure you. That is the first nervous training flight that one does every year, because you don't know what the hawks are going to do when the birds are coming through the pass, what the conditions are going to be wind-wise or whatever. Anyway, when that is behind you, they then sitting at plus minus to my house 120 kilometers. And our first flight is 225 kilometers from this house, from my position. From the Paarl area, of course, it's about 180 to 160 to 180 kilometers. But for me, it's 225. That's the first official flight. And then we progress steadily, 100 kilometer, 100 kilometer, 100. So we'll do two 250 kilometer flights. Then we'll do two 380 kilometer flights. And then we'll do a couple of 420 kilometer flights. And so we progress. And our programs, our race programs are also put whereupon if we have which is very different from what I understand to the Johannesburg program, if we race a 700 kilometer distance, until we race the next, let's say 800 kilometer distance, we give a period of time. We put 2 middle distance races in between. So you can use those pigeons that have participated in the 700 kilometer race. You can use them 3 weeks later again. You understand what I'm saying? So, and then the following long distance race, we try and put 3 weeks beyond that. So you can literally have 15 to 20 old birds that can keep you competitive in the long distance, because we are giving you, the program is facilitating a time period for recovery. And I think that plays in favor of the small loft. So he doesn't have to keep the large number of birds to participate in these events.
What are your proudest moments since you've started racing?
I've been so fortunate to have many, but of course there's always one that plays. It's long distance racing has something spectacular about it. It's that long wait, and then you literally pray that you get a bird, because anything can happen out there. And it's to see the arrival. This is the time. Bird must please come, because otherwise you're not going to get one. And when you see that bird arrive, there's nothing like it. And you don't even have to win the race. You just have got, as long as you're in the mix, you're scoring and you've got a bird, you feel elated. But I would say the greatest achievement was our truck race, Springfontein, on a given day. And we heard of no birds in the front, and I went home, and I was just married. I was living in a different address to my original Claremont address, and I got a phone call from my mother, and she said, your father was standing outside and a bird came in the dark. He put the lights on and the bird fell in the back garden, and he managed to get it in the loft, and he's timed it. And of course I was taking Nikki out for supper, and that was just put on the back burner. I was back home having a look at the bird, and that I would say will always play as one of the greatest achievements, is that sensation of getting the only bird home on the lights.
In terms of the union wins and other club wins?
I would say, there's been quite a few. I've had a from this position on our truck, we race, our truck, the membership comes from Paarl all the way back to Fishhook, so it's quite a distance. So to be competitive on our vehicle and to win to beat the 250 participants, you've got to have a phenomenal pigeon on the given day. And on one particular, I was racing under, there was a young well, he's a fantastic fancy, his name is Richard Little. He came to race partnerships with me one year in the back garden, and he's a very optimistic type pigeon fancier, and he said to me, it was Victoria West, we heard Paul had timed, and we kind of worked out exactly what time we must be, and he took 5 minutes off the time, and he said, we've got to be before the hour. And I smiled, and we were looking up, and I'll never forget, I just saw 3 birds coming flat out, and they swung around the tree and landed on the trapboard, and we were first, second and third on the truck. And that's something that not many have achieved, and it's just one of the highlights as well. And then last year we had, under COVID, we could not go any further than 800 kilometers in our program. So the 2 long distance races was 720 kilometers. It was a Colesberg, which we're going to race this weekend, and the other one was a 800 kilometer Springfontein. And I was fortunate enough to win both the long distance events. The Colesberg, I was able to beat the whole truck on velocity, and it was wonderful. A friend of mine had just got a bird in Kraaifontein, and he phoned me and he was telling me all about the bird, and I was on the phone on WhatsApp looking in the air, and I knew to line up with him, and he was the first bird we had heard of that I had to be after the hour. And while chatting to him, I just said, excuse me, and I started whistling. A bird was pitching in, and she timed. And to be on the phone chatting to somebody and see this bird, this arrival, it was great. And then the Springfontein I won last year, we managed to put 9 birds. We raced 20, and we were able to score with 9 in the top 50, and we won it. So it was those achievements that you remember. But there's many others, but I'm very grateful to have had these achievements. Yeah, you've got to keep the family of pigeons a winning family of pigeons. I know this, people brush this aside. My loft is a successful loft. That is the most important, to my mind, part of the equation. You could put great pigeons in a mediocre loft that is not ventilation, it hasn't got the correct ventilation, it's not positioned correctly, and you'll get very little out of those birds. So first and foremost, your loft has got to be a well-ventilated, comfortable loft for pigeons. And in Cape Town, this plays a big part. You'll see this. The minute you go and visit Cape Town lofts, you'll find them a lot more closed, as you can see. There's louvers on the front, there's a pitch roof. In Johannesburg, they have quite open fronts. And a very successful pigeon fancier from Pretoria came here. He resides in Martin van Staden. And he said, in a general conversation, a loft plays a very important role in Cape Town. And he learned that. That was one of the things he learned. So the loft is there. It's a successful loft. Others have copied it, and it's the dimensions seem to work well in Cape Town. Then, of course, it's the pigeons. And when you go through your peak years, you always have 1 or 2 pairs. I've been very fortunate to have had 2 fantastic pairs of pigeons that have produced many winners. And sometimes people say you only get that once in a lifetime. I was fortunate enough to get it twice, and it was both occasions in this given address. And they carried me. Now, those pairs have come to an end. It's now to take their children to the next generation and to search for that pair again. And that's the biggest challenge. It's keeping the family going and keeping it a winning family of birds.
Talking about pairs, those pairs, can you tell us more about them? Where did you get them? Which lines are they from?
The original birds, there's always luck in the game as well. My mentor was a person by the name of Derek Lowe. Not many today, the old guard will always remember that name. He was a fantastic pigeon fancier for 40 years in the Cape area. And he also had a small team formula, and he had a family of birds, what he called the meal putries. The original cock came from Belgium, and it was mated to a traditional South African strain, which was the putries at the time, and this was his family of birds, and he started me up. And then, people get very caught on names of strains, and Emile was a name that we were fascinated by. And Jules Gilles used to come to South Africa to visit from Belgium, and he had a pigeon stud in Belgium, and he was the editor of the first Belgium newspaper, if my memory serves me correctly. And he would come and visit, and he was a great ambassador. And I met him, and I said to him, asked him if the male strain still was in Belgium. He said there was a person in Belgium that still had the whole family of birds, and my dad was going over the following year to visit Belgium Lofts, and he came back with babies. One was sent initially by Jules Gres, then my dad came back with some babies from the same loft. And those birds crossed in very well. So in the 90s, that was the family. The traditional Emile Patry family crossed with these birds that came from Belgium. And that carried me right through into the 90s. And then late 90s, early 2000s, you could see the family was now needing some help. I was looking for fresh blood, and I got a hold of Roland Bauer. And at that given time, he was flying partnerships with Paul Pedro in Johannesburg. And the Olympiad was being held here in year 2000, and Paul was here with Roland and Johan Schmidt. And Paul informed me that their best baby had hit the wire. And Roland and Johan Schmidt had just prior to that had their Millennium Cell, and the family of birds that was very successful in that catalogue was the low voter family of birds. And Paul enlightened me that this hen was bred off those birds, and he sent that hen down to Cape Town as a present. And I put it to one of the old traditional family cocks, and it just exploded. The first two babies I bred were both winners. In the very same year they participated in as yearlings. And one of those hens went on to win a classical 650 kilometer race for me. And then her brothers and sisters carried on. And that cross took me right into 2010, very competitively. And then and from there the family progressed to the next level. That was the first kick pair. Then a daughter off that pair, I was a phenomenal racer. She had gone to stud. And Melvin Smith was a very competitive fancier in our combine. He won the championship a number of occasions, and he was packing up. And there was a bird's number. There was a fantastic racing bird, racing cock that young Richard Little, who raced with me at the given time, pointed out to me and said, "We must ask him about this pigeon. What's happening?" And I asked Melvin. He said, "No, nobody had booked him." And I said, "Can I buy him?" And he sold that pigeon to me, and I put that to the daughter of this fantastic pair, and that was the next step. They bred fantastic pigeons again, and that, to this day, this is what is in the loft. But he's now come to an end. The hens come to an end. Now the children are here, so now it's to look for who do I bring, what do I do next now, to try and get back to get that quality of pair again, and that's going to be a continuous challenge. She took second Victoria West, second overall truck. She was first combine, first section, and second truck. And then proceeded to score many more times. Fantastic in racing in. This is last year's winner that I spoke about in the interview. She won the Coles. I raced her 5 times last year. She scored 3 top positions, and her final race was this coming event, which we are racing this weekend. Colesberg was 720 kilometers, and Dr. Gavin Rouse actually proceeded to assist us with our liberation, and he had video footage, and was from the start to the finish was strong headwinds, and we knew the birds were going to have a long day's flight, and she achieved the best velocity on the whole truck on that event. At present, this is my best stocking. She is also a truck winner. She won the Victoria West truck, which is 520 kilometers. On that given day, I was first, second, and third on the truck. I think there's only 3 or 4 of us who've achieved that since the WCTA participated as a truck. Participated with a truck result. And she's been a fantastic breeder this end.
How do you keep them strong going? I mean, your medication, your feeding, just give us a glimpse of What you feeding on?
This loft here, actually, I only keep, as I said here, I only start with 75 pigeons in this loft, which is a big loft with a small number of birds. So generally, from a health perspective, you're mainly watching the likes of crop canker. I don't have worms in the back garden. My birds don't free trap in this back garden. It's not an ideal garden to have that because the hawks can corner them quite easily. So whenever I'm homing my youngsters, I'm always outdoors with them, monitoring them from the roof to the board and then to the air and then back into the loft. So I don't have worm problems. I'm very hygienic, so I have very little malaria problems. So those are two treatments that are literally eliminated in the back garden. Crop canker, you can't get around. That's always it. Coccidiosis. Cape Town is an area with a lot of rainfall. It's got to be considered, and when birds are examined, if they've got it, they must be treated. So those are the treatments that I mainly focus on, and they're always part of my program. Every 2 to 3 weeks, I will do something for crop canker to make sure that's eliminated. And if anybody phones me that they are struggling, the first thing I say is, what is your crop canker count? You've got to get crop canker out of your birds to be competitive. And have you been hygienic through the off-season, meaning through the molting period? Because if you've got pigeon flies on your birds, you could have malaria. Then you've got to eliminate malaria. I have my birds tested before every season. They've never had malaria, so I don't treat malaria. Anyway, but different for other people. So correct loft, good pigeons, and to eliminate this, and then pigeon food is hugely important. So the real objective before every season is to find the right millie. That's a big Cape Town objective. So people drive out, they'll go to all the pet shop, the feed stores, and look for the quality millie. We generally raise a yellow millie, a yellow pea. I have white sorghum, and I look for sunflower in my mix. So seed is very important. So it's a process of elimination. You've got to get each one of those seeds prior to the season and have that ready. So loft, pigeons, food, then medication. When you keep just 70 birds in a loft like this, I don't have to give many antibiotics, but you do have to treat for respiratory. You've got to treat for E. coli and salmonellosis. But today you have test kits. MedPit makes a kit that you can take the pigeon's droppings, test it, and then you know if you've got E. coli and if you need to treat for it. So there's a lot of, but as I've said before, crop canker, it's ongoing. It's an ongoing challenge.
So what biggest mistake that you've ever done?
I would say I sometimes take too long to do a treatment, and the birds are doing well, and you can't get away with not treating pigeons. Don't let anybody say they don't treat their birds. I don't treat much, but I think I kind of shoot myself in the foot whereupon I don't put a program together where I do it a little more regularly. So sometimes I'm like putting out the fire, and I should have my birds maybe tested, like a smear done a little more regularly, or rather, instead of trying to not treat for respiratory for 6 to 8 weeks, maybe bring it in a little bit earlier, and do the treatment. So I think that's my mistake, but that goes to this back garden. But generally, I have a very consistent performance out of this back garden. So yeah, when you've had a good race the previous weekend, do you want to fiddle with a winning formula? You say, no, let me leave it for another week. And realistically, I should go and have those birds tested, but nothing can be wrong with them. They've done so well this weekend. Why should I test them? And then next week you don't race as well, and you go and test them, and your person enlightens you that you've got a crop canker count going to the roof. Now, if you just did that a week earlier, not rested on your laurels, those are little mistakes I make. That's my own personal faults.
What ultimate advice you can give out to fanciers?
From a Cape Town perspective, I will always say the loft. The loft is just so important. People must, we have variable winds. Today you can feel there's like a southeaster blowing out. It's a cold wind. You don't want those drafts to go into your loft. You can't condition birds in a drafty cold loft. So it's to give the pigeons the best environment to race out of. Then you can go and invest your money in quality pigeons. And my advice is to always look what you want to achieve in, and to then study a pigeon fancier that is doing well in that category. And you must also take into account where he lives and how often he is achieving these results. It's not a once-off. Is it a family of birds that continuously does this? And then you can go and invest your money. And let me be honest with you, you don't have to spend a fortune with pigeons. There is a clever way of buying pigeons. You can buy the last round of eggs. Every pigeon fancier will be willing to sell their last round of eggs or even give it away. You'll get the best bloodlines at a very nominal fee. But if you're going to go and ask the pigeon fancier, I want you to breed me a pair of babies off your number one pair. He hasn't got time to breed your babies off his number one pair. He needs them for himself. But if you say, can I buy the final pair of eggs? You acquire that bloodline at a lot cheaper price than you would be by having to buy a winning child or whatever. So there is ways of acquiring good pigeons at affordable prices.
No, thanks a lot. And do you have closing remarks?
Yeah, I just hope Cape Town continues on their journey. It looks like we're doing a lot more. The trucks, the different organizations are working well together. And as I said to you, this weekend we are racing with the Federated Board to Colesberg. It will equate to over 700 lofts competing. And yeah, it's very exciting that we are doing things together now. We're doing combined results. It's all for the good of the sport. And as I said, we can keep to this formula of looking after let's say the middle class pigeon fancier, the small team fanciers, that keep him in our thoughts. We're on a good, successful road in Cape Town. That's my personal opinion. Thank you so much for your time.
And there you have it from Karl Schwormstedt. The loft is another winning formula for any pigeon fancier. As we are in Cape Town on this Cape Town tour, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to our TV channel. Until next time, this is Pigeon Duiwe News.